When I started making the script for this video, it was originally going to be a simple addition to my timeline video. As more and more people started to view my timeline video, however, more and more questions came out of the comments. I've tried my best to answer them, but there seems to be many of the same questions. Rather than repeatedly answering the same question, I decided that it would be a lot better to just make a video explaining a couple of the most asked questions. The first question I get a lot is related to the Muna reference in Generation 1. People usually say, wait, they reference Muna in Generation 1? Wouldn't that make Unova in the Gen 5 games appear in the classic timeline? While yes, that is a pretty blatant reference to Muna, I don't believe it means that Muna or Unova necessarily exist in this timeline. Let's take a look at the exact quote from the girl. The Pokemon here are so chunky. There should be a pink one with a floral pattern. I think the big thing to take away from what she says is that there should be a Pokemon that's pink and has a floral pattern. She isn't saying that there is one, but rather that there should be one. Let's be honest, it's pretty unlikely that Game Freak would have even been brainstorming for Generation 5 at the time of Generation 1's production. It's possible that they might have used the quote as an idea for Muna, but I don't think it means much more outside of it just being a random NPC dialogue line. The next question I get a lot is where do the anime and manga fall into place on the timeline? So for my big timeline video, I was really only concerned with doing the games and getting them into a proper order. I think it's pretty clear that other Pokemon material outside of the games will have its own timeline. For example, the Pokemon Adventures/Special manga would have its own timeline, as it's not connected in any way at all to the games. The same goes for the anime, as there are no ties to the games at all. Or is there? Recently, in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, there's been some small hinting that the anime and the games share a timeline. In the Delta episode, it's possible to have Steven talk about some of his old adventures. He talks about how he once had a chance to see Rayquaza face to face, and that he battled it alongside a man who had a black Charizard. This is a reference to Alon, who appears in the anime special Strongest Mega Evolution Act 1 and Act 2. Steven appears in the second act as a helping hand and an opponent to Alon. At this point, it could be argued that this is still all in the Mega timeline and that nothing is really blending into the anime timeline. During the Act 1 special, however, right after Marin meets Alon, she immediately tells him stories about a trainer named Ash and all of the events that happened in Lumiose, such as the rampaging Garchomp that Ash faced. So to sum this all up, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire Steven references the Strongest Mega Evolution specials, which in turn reference the anime with Ash. It might be a little convoluted, but there's definitely a connection between these. This all begs the question though, is the anime in the same timeline as the games? Based on all of this, it would definitely seem likely. Elaine's story could seamlessly fit into the games without conflicting with any major elements. Unfortunately though, bringing in the main anime with Ash would conflict with lots of existing ideas from the games. For example, in the anime and in the games, there is a character named Serena. They share a lot in common. They have the same basic design, live in the same house, are both the daughter of the famous Rhyhorn racer Grace, and they both start off as Pokemon trainers. I think it's safe to say that they are pretty much the same character. Where they differ, however, is what they do in their respective lives. The anime Serena goes on a journey with Ash as well as Bonnie and Clement. She eventually decides that she wants to be a Pokemon performer and takes the necessary steps to do that. As far as we know, this Serena does not help take down Team Flare or gain the power to use Mega Evolution. The Serena from the games, while similar, is vastly different. Regardless of whether you play as her or have her as a rival, she still does things that the anime Serena does not. The Serena from the games leaves her town with her friends Calum, Trevor, Shauna, and Tierno. She eventually helps take down Team Flare and ultimately unlocks Mega Evolution for her own use. I think it's fairly obvious now, but these characters are both supposed to be parallel versions of one another. This means that even though they're the same character, they do different things in their respective timelines, which in this case would be the anime timeline and the manga timeline. Because they're in separate timelines, there's no way that they could be in the same one as the same character. It would be impossible for Serena to embark on a journey with Ash, Bonnie, and Clement, and Tierno, Caleb, Shauna, and Trevor at the same time. Many other characters face this problem too, such as Gary and Blue. While they are technically the same character, they do such vast and different things in their timelines that there's no way they could ever share the same timeline together. Because of this, I honestly don't have an answer for if the anime and the games are linked somewhere in the timeline. Steven suggested so, but as I've shown, it's ultimately impossible to have them in the same timeline. The only way I can think of that could possibly add the X and Y anime is if it's an alternate anime timeline, where Ash still saved Lumiose, but never met up with Serena, Bonnie, or Clement. That way, Serena could go on her adventure to save Team Flare, while Bonnie and Clement could stay at the Lumiose City Gym. For the time being though, I don't have an answer, so I'm going to say that the two timelines aren't linked. But if anyone in the comments can share some info with me on why they are, then I'll gladly accept it. Hopefully all of this has made sense to everybody out there. I understand that it can get a little bit confusing. The last question I'm going to be covering today is one that I've seen thrown out a lot in my timeline video. People state that because of Looker washing up on the Battle Resort in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, it means that it comes after Pokemon X and Y. To clarify what the people mean a little bit, in Pokemon X and Y, after you beat the Elite Four, you can take part in a side quest that deals with the Looker Investigation Bureau. At the end of the side quest, Looker states that he has to leave Lumiose City, as he's part of the International Police, which work around the globe to fight crime. Much to everyone's sadness, he departs Lumiose City by train. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, once you reach the Battle Resort, you find a man washed up on the shore. He unfortunately has amnesia, but it's fairly obvious that it's Looker. When you talk to him, you receive an Audinite, along with lots of confused and jumbled phrases from him. I can definitely see how people would think that Oros would come after X and Y because of Looker washing up in the Battle Resort, but unfortunately there are some plot holes I found in this theory. One thing to note about all of this is that Looker never says where he's going when he leaves Lumiose City. He doesn't say he's going to Hoenn, he doesn't say he's going to Unova, he just says that he's leaving Lumiose City. The next thing to note about all of this is that he leaves by train. In Oros, you find him washed up on the Battle Resort, which is an island only accessible by boats. If Looker indeed wanted to go to Hoenn after Kalos, why didn't he go to one of the many seaside towns in Kalos to depart by boat? Towns like Silage City, Ambret Town, Shalor City, and Comorin City are all next to the ocean and would easily have boats available to him. As we've seen in the games, most towns and cities don't have any train tracks or train stations in them. None of the towns on the coast have any sort of train depot, so it's pretty clear that Looker isn't catching a ride to one of the coastal towns for a boat. Where could Looker be going then? I don't think that anyone knows, but I can only assume that it's landlocked if a train can get him there. I've already shown that Oros comes before X and Y because of the creation of Mr. Bonding. If this is anything to go by, then we can assume that Looker eventually is cured of amnesia and moves to Kalos at some point in time to start his investigation bureau. What Looker does between Oros and X and Y is the real mystery though. Who knows what kind of adventures he's had in the time before he started the bureau? Perhaps after he regains his memory he goes to Sinnoh, and you could possibly meet him in a future Diamond and Pearl remake. Only time will tell what happens though. And those are some explanations of the 3 most common questions I saw in the comments for my timeline video. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them as comments in this video. If you disagree with one of my explanations or think something else happened, go ahead and leave a comment with an explanation, please. In the last video, I got a lot of people saying I was wrong, but they didn't clarify or leave any sort of evidence. I'd love to get the timeline right, or at the very least, hear other opinions about it, so please leave an explanation of what you think is right or what you think happened. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.